Communication training with Dan O'Connor. Now, the next little trick that I'm going to teach you today is all about remembering names. Remember names. Because if you've been to one of my conferences, many people will comment at the end of them or during them on how I remember everybody's names. And they'll say to me, how do you remember everybody's name? And there are a couple different ways to remember people's names. And I know that a lot of people who are watching this video struggle with remembering names. And we find ourselves in situations where we're meeting somebody at a professional event for the second or third time, and we know we've met them before. We know that we have given them, or that they have given us their name, but we can't remember it for the life of us. So what I'd like to do is teach you one very simple strategy, and we'll cover more later, that will help you remember people's names. The next time you see somebody whose name you may have forgotten, don't be afraid to simply walk up to them and say, hi, I don't know if you remember meeting me, but I'm Dan O'Connor. What's your name again? Of course you want to substitute your name for mine, but it's normally okay, and people don't mind when you walk up to them and say, hi, I don't know if you remember meeting me, but I'm so-and-so. What's your name again? They'll give you their name, and then that's over. We don't have to play the old bringing a friend over and say, hey, ask them what their name is in front of me so that I can pretend like I remember it. Normally we don't need to do that, but to avoid that whole situation, the strategy that I have found the most helpful of all is when I meet somebody, I'll ask them their name, and then when they give me their name, I will have to take a moment and mentally picture somebody who shares that name. Hopefully it's a cartoon character, a funny movie character, somebody that I know well who is a character. What you want to do is associate that person with some other person whose name you know very well and that hopefully strikes an emotional chord with you, such as humor. Because, for example, I met a woman recently whose name was Patty. And so immediately when I met her, I, in my brain, visualized Peppermint Patty, from the Peanuts, standing beside her and kind of holding her shoulders. And the reason you want to do that, somebody taught me that, is when you create that visual image of the person whose name you remember doing something with that person. It could be slapping them in the face, it could be throwing a football at them, it could be holding their hand, it could be standing beside them and stroking their hair. But when you know somebody who has the same name as someone who you just met, picture that person doing something with the person that you just met. Again, something physical where they're touching, where they're together. And what that does is creates a very strong picture in your brain because you're using somebody that you already know, that you're already familiar with. Again, it can be real or it can be an imaginary character. It could be somebody that you saw in a movie, on a cartoon, but someone who you're already familiar with. If you can connect them with that person that you just met visually and doing something, and especially if you can connect it with humor, the next time you see that person, it's much, much easier for your brain to remember not their name, but the character that you associated with them, doing something with them. And that, in turn, helps you remember their name. The other thing that helps you remember people's names is as you're doing this, because really, unless you have some type of mental hook, you will be doomed. You cannot remember everybody's name. It's impossible. If you go to any of those memory seminars, or if you read a book on improving your memory, they all have that common link. They all tell you, don't just try and repeat their name in your head or say to yourself, Midge, 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 Midge. Don't try to rely on your memory to help you remember things. Instead, you have to play games in your head. You have to have hooks. You have to have creative stories to help you remember things. They all have that in common. And so while you're creating that mental hook to help you remember that person's name, repeat their name out loud at least 3 times when you first meet them. For example, when I met Patty, I said, hi, I'm Dan O'Connor, what's your name? And remember that when you meet somebody, that's the verbal pattern you want to use. Not simply, hi, what's your name? You want to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, what's your name? As you extend your hand to shake their hand. And when I said, hi, I'm Dan O'Connor, what's your name? And she said, hi, my name's Patty. I shook Patty's hand and I said, hi, Patty, nice to meet you. Tell me, Patty, yada, yada, yada. And then after a couple of minutes, if you're going to move along, if you're going to meet somebody else, especially in a big social gathering, let's say you're at a networking event, you say, hi, Peter, it's nice to meet you. Tell me, Peter, yada, yada, yada. And then in a few minutes when you're about to move along, say, well, Peter, it was really nice to meet you. I hope to see you again soon. Or however you close and then leave, you have used their name 3 times, and each time you use it, again, remember that mental picture that you drew in your head. And if you do that, you will be able to remember an entire room full of people's names. It is amazing how much that one trick has helped me. I can have a workshop where there might be 150 people in that workshop, and they will say to me at the end, if you see me on the street, will you remember my name? And I'll say, of course I will, Patty. Of course I will, Mary. Of course I will, Joe. Because once you have really solidified a picture in your brain, such as the one we described, a character doing something with that person, you won't ever forget it. And if you do that one thing, you can avoid the uncomfortable, hi, I don't know if you remember meeting me, but I'm Dan O'Connor. What's your name again? And people will be in awe of your ability to remember everybody's name. 3 minutes before you go into